Morning, everybody. Well, I was going to say it's fantastic to be standing up in front of a room full of people again, but I can't actually see you. So I'm going to assume you're there. I can see the front row. Thank you so much for coming along today, for getting out of your bedrooms, your broom cupboards, your front rooms, all the various locations that you've been working on Zoom, Teams, whatever. Your collaborative tipple of choices over the last 2 years, and it's absolutely fantastic to be standing here, able to talk to all of you. I'm Jonathan Gale, I'm the CEO of Sabio Group. As Stuart said, I joined Sabio at the end of December 2019, and then obviously we went very quickly after that, 3 months after that, into lockdown. It's been an absolute privilege doing this job and working with the team at Sabio over the last couple of years, 2.5 years, but it's absolutely fantastic to be able to get out and meet people in person again, and to be able to stand up on this stage and talk to you. So, just a little bit about today. We've got, I think, should have by about now, about 358 people in the room, which is brilliant. That's exactly what our goals were for this event relative to registrations. It's fantastic to see you all. Within those attendees, we've got 25 people who are giving up their time to speak, and I really, really appreciate that because it takes time, a lot of time actually, to prepare presentations, to get ready to speak. It's quite nerve-wracking. I've forgotten how nerve-wracking it is. Luckily, I can't see any of you, so that's helping. And but I really appreciate all the time and effort that everybody's put in. And a lot of those speakers come from our partners, and we have a lot of leading vendor partners that we work with, and they've really helped us pull this together, whether that's actually practically supporting us, whether that's speaking at the events alongside customers who are speaking as well, and in some cases sponsoring the event as well. So thank you to all of those. Most importantly, in the room we have a lot of customers, a lot of Sabio's customers, and we also have a lot of other enterprises that aren't Sabio customers yet, but who we're actively talking to about the prospect of becoming a Sabio customer. And there are some amazing names in the room. Stuart mentioned it to start with, that we have got some of the country's leading thought leaders on CX, customer experience, digital transformation in general, and on customer experience. And obviously, I make no apologies for the fact that a lot of our customers have a contact center at the core of their service delivery model. So we're going to look at and talk about quite a lot of stuff to do with contact centers, but within the overall umbrella of customer experience and employee experience, and within the overall umbrella of digital transformation as well. So I hope you find today useful. In the breakout sessions or other opportunities you get to talk to people from other companies, from other enterprises, here are a few of, not all, but a lot of the names and brands that are here. Some amazing, highly recognizable brands and companies who've been doing amazing work over the last 2 years through the pandemic to drive and improve customer experience, but also wrestle with all sorts of issues, problems, and challenges with regards to managing and looking after your own employee base, their well-being, their productivity. So I think you'd agree, pretty amazing set of, I'm saying amazing too many times, great set of customers, interesting set of customers and enterprises to talk to, all of whom are wrestling with the same problems. Now, before I start the main part of my presentation, in terms of wrestling with problems, obviously any issues that we're talking about today really pale into insignificance with what's happening in Ukraine at the moment and the war that's going on. So I just want to do a little bit of fundraising at the start. So we set ourselves a goal internally of raising £7,500 from staff, which with the support of our investor, our backer, Horizon, we're doubling up to get to 15,000. We're at a total of about 11,000, 12,000 now. So the stage one of my appeal is to say to all of the Sabio staff that are here, can you please get on the Just Giving page, and let's, during the course of today, try and drive to our goal of 7.5 internally, which means a £15,000 donation to the Red Cross appeal in Ukraine. And then for everybody else who isn't a Sabio employee who's here, I'm asking for your help to try and get us to £20,000. And I'm delighted to announce that if we can raise 2,500 from the room, which is somewhere, my maths needs a bit of work, but probably about £7 each for all the attendees, possibly £10. Then we can get to 2.5, and then we will fund match to make that 20. So that's with the support of Horizon. I want to thank them for that, but I just, it's unimaginable what's happening there. We do have about 20 employees in Ukraine. We managed to get a number out. A number is still there. Currently in touch with, they're all safe and have moved west in the country. But it's been absolutely shocking to see what's unfolding in front of us on a daily basis. And so I want us to remember that as we're going through the day. And if you can contribute to that appeal, that would be fantastic. So I'm just going to wind the clock back a little bit and think about where Sabio was at in 2019 when they last held this event in person. Obviously, we've had virtual events, but it's obviously not the same as being able to get together in person and meet colleagues, meet peers from across the industry. So Sabio was about just under 500 employees at that point, and great set of partners, great set of vendors that we work with who are market leaders, particularly in the contact center and customer experience space. A lot of them, well, all of them are here, and a number of them are going to be speaking today as well. So, partners like Avaya, Verint, Gamma, Nuance, and Semaphone, and those are absolutely still leading partners of ours today, but obviously the company's changed a lot through both a lot of organic growth and through acquisitions. So today, we're actually slightly more people than that now. I think we're about 1,100 people in total. We've got a whole range of additional partners that sit alongside our existing established relationships. Amazing companies like Twilio, Google, AWS, Salesforce, Colt, and Genesys, obviously. So between that combination of partnerships that we've got within the industry, we're able to be genuinely vendor agnostic when we work with all of you and just focus on what we want to do, which is basically just combine expertise, either in technologies or in verticals or in business processes with these partners to drive innovation for you. And that's fundamentally what we're absolutely laser focused on. One of the interesting outputs of that for us is what that has meant in terms of our involvement in automation and automation projects with customers. So if we look back to 3 years ago, in that year, we automated about 5 million transactions for our customers, 5 million interactions with their customers, interactions which otherwise would have gone to a person in a contact center. This year, we're going to automate about 200 million. So for us alone, that's about a 40-fold increase in what we're doing, and that's partially driven by the pandemic, I think, but equally, or probably more so, is driven by the explosion in computing power and accessibility to AI and automation technologies. So I thought what was interesting for a second was to actually look at what's happened between those two bridging points. So between March 2019 and early April now, what's actually been happening in terms of the customer satisfaction. So we've had a huge amount of work that we've all collectively done. We've all grappled with a sudden shift overnight to home working. But what actually happened to customer sentiment during that period and during the pandemic? And so we looked at the UK Customer Satisfaction Index to try and find some answers to that. So there we are on the right-hand side of that graph. We're now, as of the start of this year, at a higher level of customer satisfaction than we've ever been at in the UK. Obviously, I'm taking that as a proxy for Europe, for the rest of the world. We have a number of customers in Europe or have a pan-global footprint. And I suspect you'd probably find a similar set of results if you looked across any of those territories. So let's have a look at what might have driven those changes and what might be driving the current uptick. So one of the obvious things to think about is spend. This year, I'm going to focus specifically on contact center investment. Globally, we're going to spend about 200 billion. That compares with 140 billion that was being spent back in 2019. Now, you might think that spending dipped in between those 2 points, but it didn't actually. It increased pretty steadily. It's just the effects of the pandemic and the impact that it was having on customer service experience, the customer journey for everybody, was so severe early on. We conclude that that's what drove that initial downturn. But then all those investments and that increased investment that was being made during the pandemic in customer experience technologies, a number of the mega trends that we're seeing, like AI and automation, has actually now driven us to the point where we've got higher customer sat than we've ever had. The question or the challenge for all of us is, can we continue that upward trajectory? Now, when we look at, and within Sabio, when we look at what's happened over that period, we're particularly obsessed about the impact of these 5 mega trends, these 5 insights, and we work really hard to try and build our propositions and our value propositions for our customers around these 5 things. But they're not really about us. They're just about how the market is changing. But I just wanted to spend a little bit of time stepping through them with you now, just to share our thinking, because this really shapes pretty much everything we do with our products, with our services, how we organize our people. And then these things are nothing to do with Sabio. They're just things that are happening in this market, in the CX digital transformation market, and in the customer experience space specifically. So there are 5 of them. The first one doesn't really need any introduction, but clearly everybody is moving their technology delivery to the cloud. Now that could be private cloud, that could be a public cloud. The reality is that almost all customers now, almost our customers, are in some form of hybrid, even if they've still got on-premise software that they're managing, or somebody else is managing, like us, is managing for them. The reality is that wrapped around that, they'll have a combination of private and public cloud technologies to go with it. And that's backed up by the spending numbers. 172 billion in SaaS. It's about a 50% increase in the last 2 years. And we've still got, within this shift to cloud, we've still got something like 2/3 of the market to go. So this is just a trend which is going to accelerate. It's ever present, it's in the background, and every single customer we talk to is trying to figure out what their journey to the cloud looks like. So that's had a big effect on that dip. The next one is this concept of digital first, and we spend a lot of time talking about this internally. This is this idea that there's a whole generation of people, and when we first kind of mapped these insights out, pre-pandemic, this was very much focused on the demographic change. So younger people whose first channel of choice for interacting with all of you, with all of your enterprises, was via a digital channel as opposed to speaking to somebody. Sorry, it's a shameless plug for one of the Sabio water bottles, which are available at no cost, but there are limited supplies. I think there's just about enough for everybody in the room. So if you want to go and find the table when you do the breakout session and grab one, much better than having loads of plastic around. So we were really focused, as I said, about 3 years ago on, is there this whole generation of people who just want to interact via an app, interact via social media, not necessarily speak to a human as the first port of call. And we think that has played out, but we also think COVID has done, the pandemic or the effects of the pandemic have actually accelerated that propensity or that desire to work via a digital channel in older generations as well. Partially through necessity initially, because of resource constraints caused by the pandemic, you simply could not get hold of a person sometimes. And so you were forced to adopt digital channels, and older generations were forced to engage via mechanisms, social, mobile apps that they never thought they were going to need to do. And there's some very interesting data around all of this. If you look at the explosion in digital channels, one of our partners, Twilio, was looking at increase in number of digital touch points across Europe and saw massive increases. I mean, up 63% in the UK, up 61% overall, and that's during the pandemic period. So huge increase in customers using non-analog, non-voice channels to talk to their customers. And that was also backed up when we did a specific piece of research for the online event that we did a year ago that saw percentage increases in the hundreds of percent in terms of use of channels like WhatsApp and other social media channels. And I think there's always been a perception that those channels were somehow inferior in terms of the customer satisfaction that they drove. But that's not actually what we've seen at all. And again, from the same source, from Twilio, this data compares the average customer satisfaction rate between different channels, both to, if you like, what would normally be considered to be the absolute top of the line in terms of talking to somebody face-to-face or talking to someone in a contact center, and then comparing that with some of the other channels like SMS, email, interacting with the website. And you can see from Jan 21 that actually, first of all, it's really interesting, isn't a particularly big gap between the highest and the lowest. There is the lowest in this one being SMS, being text, and the highest already by this point in 21 being a mobile app. So a mobile app, single most effective way of driving customer satisfaction. But even in the last 12 months, what you've seen is an acceleration in the effectiveness of the digital channels, particularly social, which has climbed by 5 percentage points. And also the app, the mobile app, remains a killer. In fact, there's been improvement across all of the channels. But I think this only emphasizes the need for all of us working with you to be able to support customers across every single channel equally well. And to do that, that creates a big data challenge, which I'll talk a little bit about in a bit. But just before I move on from this point, I thought it's worth touching on these demographic, interesting demographic feedback, again from the same survey. It looked at customer sat rates by age group, and this kind of blows out of the water the old adage about grumpy old people, because it seems that the older we are, the happier we are from a customer satisfaction perspective. And actually, it's the grumpy young people, the millennials, that are going to give us all the challenges, customer experience-wise, over the next 10 to 20 years. And if you combine the propensity of younger age groups to want to engage via digital channels, that puts even more pressure on all of us from a data perspective, because you have to be able to provide a joined-up experience, and you have to be able to understand that somebody who may ultimately be talking to an advisor in a contact center has probably, particularly if they're from a younger generation, tried to self-serve via a website, via a mobile app, via an FAQ, via web chat, even if they're being fully aware of the fact that they're talking to a bot when they're talking initially to the web chat. So some quite striking differences in the satisfaction based on age group, but also, if you look at this, some quite striking improvements just in the last year across all age groups, which is a good sign. And I think all of you in the room that are involved in delivering that improved customer experience can draw satisfaction from that. So underpinning all of this change that we're seeing around us, not just in the world of customer experience and digital transformation, but generally in life, is this massive explosion in AI and automation. And the reason it's particularly exploding is the democratization of it. The fact that this technology is becoming cheaper, easier to deploy, more accessible, faster to deploy, and the speed of deployment is absolutely crucial as well in this. So I'm not going to spend too long talking about this because we're going to talk a lot about it today. Stuart's going to come up in a minute and spend more time talking about it. But for those of you that haven't seen this graph, and you'll see this or something similar many times over, you all know about Moore's Law, you all know about Moore's Law? Yeah? Let's see if I can pull somebody out. Anybody not know what Moore's Law is? My eyes have adapted. No one's putting their hand up. It's all about the number of transistors that you can get on a chip and how that's doubling every couple of years. And that's always been the measure of, look, isn't technology growing at a rapid rate? What we're finding with AI is it's doubling every 10 weeks, every 3.5 months, roughly. And what is doubling? What's doubling is the computing power which is assigned to training neural nets and learning engines. So we're seeing this acceleration in the computing power that's available, the computing power that's being devoted to AI and training AI engines. And this, I mean, if you look at this and you look at the rate of growth and you think about 10, 20, 30 years down the road, it's obviously going to have an impact on the whole of society. But specifically, what we're talking about in the room today around customer experience and digital transformation, it's having a very, very real impact because it's allowing all of us to access this technology, to drive insight around how customers feel about a particular topic and then allow us to actually deploy solutions really, really quickly that both reduce wait times, reduce load because it's much easier to self-serve, and actually improve customer sat at the same time. So that kind of win-win of reducing cost and improving customer sat. And AI and automation adoption underpins that. It's one of the absolute megatrends that's completely changing our industry. The effect of that, though, or the effect of that, we shouldn't just think about automation as a way of deflecting traffic or allowing people to self-serve. It's having multiple effects on the human component, our agents, our advisors, the people that work in contact centers, or if you don't have a contact center, B2B business, still people that will work in a support environment, or our technical experts in the back office that need to be available to customers. Because there's two things going on. There's proliferation of channels, and that's hard for people, depending upon how you're organized. The data hasn't kept pace with that in terms of the cross-channel information. And because a lot of the simpler transactions or interactions are being automated, the type of issues or problems which are getting to an agent or an advisor are, by their very nature, they're more complicated, they're more difficult to solve. So in the middle of all this, you've got humans, you've got people. So they're not just dealing with voice, they're now dealing with all these other channels, potentially, depending on how you're set up. Some of you will be set up with multi-skilled teams, some of you will be set up with dedicated teams. But as we've seen, there's been an explosion in these non-voice channels over the last 2 years, and it's really important as a company, if you want to deliver a good customer experience to your consumers, to provide a similar experience, similarly positive experience across all these channels. And the tools that we've traditionally used in the contact center to manage that, workforce optimization tools and reporting analytics to make sure we've got the right number of people, they're not up to the job anymore, left alone. So first of all, we need to be automating to try and reduce the load. And we also need to be using that same technology to assist people in these more complicated interactions. And this has never been more crucial because the pandemic, the effects of the pandemic, people are having to take contact centers that were physical locations where people worked together, where they shared ideas, where they got up to speed quicker when you onboarded them because they were rubbing shoulders with their colleagues and listening to what they say. All of those people moved into their bedrooms, into their studies, into their front rooms, wherever, into their garden offices, and started working alone. And that has caused havoc from the people that we talk to in terms of their teams and the impact on their teams. And when we talk to our customers, these three A's keep coming up. One is the problem of attraction and the difficulty with hiring. We spoke to one customer quite recently who'd gone out looking to add 50 agents to a group, and after 3 months had managed to hire 2 people that they thought was good enough. So there's a big problem, and we're going to spend time talking about it and sharing ideas around it during the day as well. There's a big problem with attracting the right caliber of people to be representatives to you, contact center representatives, contact center agents. Once you've got them, there's then a problem hanging on to them. Attrition across the industry as a whole is hovering around 20-25% for contact center-based staff. In certain cases, some industries are seeing 50% attrition. And so if you combine that with the difficulty with hiring, this is a real problem. And then you layer on top of that the third A, which is absence. Obviously, practically some of that's been through people having COVID. But then also, as we know, there really isn't much dividing line between mental and physical health these days. They're both equally important. They're completely interlinked, intertwined. So overall well-being, and that's something that we're also going to talk a little bit about today, about how you can use AI tools to help you identify those people within your teams that are struggling. Overall well-being is absolutely critical. So this megatrend is not going anywhere. Right? These pressures, these problems are going to continue. And then, again, I'm not going to spend too long on this, but the final component of pulling all of this together is the data. And data, I can only speak specifically for Sabio. I know our data is still too siloed. So I don't think it's probably much of a stretch to assume that many of you still have siloed data, whether that's siloed between departments, whether that's siloed in channels, between voice, between social. This is a common challenge for all of us to address. There's more and more data being generated. Doesn't necessarily mean there's more and more data being stored, and it definitely doesn't mean that data doesn't necessarily mean that data is being used to drive insight, and that's the crucial piece that's missing. I also find it incredibly exciting. There are a couple of projects that we've kicked off with customers now which are all about generating this pool of data that can be accessed across all of the touch points to actually provide a genuinely joined up view of the customer and all the interactions that they're having with you during the customer journey. And I think this is just an area that's going to explode in terms of spending and necessity over the next 2 or 3 years. So why should you care? So what, from a CX perspective? Why are these 5 things important? Well, again, I'm sure all of you already know this, and to subscribe to this view, otherwise you probably wouldn't be here. But there is empirical evidence now that shows that the companies that lead in terms of the customer experience that they deliver, so that's investing, but not just investing, but delivering better customer experience, financially outperform their competitors who don't. This is from a Watermark Consulting study, and it shows quite a marked difference between the financial performance of public companies who really heavily invest and focus on having a great customer experience. You know, B2C, B2B2C companies that focus on delivering, or B2B, great customer experience to their customers compared with those of average across S&P 500, or those that consciously manage that type or part of their operation as a cost center and lag behind. So it's worth doing, but the key, we think, is speed based on that data. So we've really seen over the last 2 years a massive shift from just with our customer engagements, from waterfall type projects to agile projects, running in a DevOps methodology where you've got these really short deployment cycles. It doesn't matter whether it's building an application, it doesn't matter whether it's deploying an AI solution. It's like, look at the data, draw the insight, execute, run it in live, look at the data, draw the insight again, and then execute, and keep these loops short. In order to kind of support that for our customers, we've had a massive push on the breadth of our capability, and we pushed out of contact center and customer experience specifically, heavily into the AI and automation space, both with our partnerships and our recruitment, and also into the CRM space with our partner Salesforce. We've actually made specific acquisitions to underpin those, to bring in people and know-how. And as a result of that, I'm really excited about the fact that we are going to be launching, or are launching, Sabio Console, which is our AI platform, conversational platform, which pulls together both components and our own intellectual property into a framework that allows you to manage, orchestrate, visualize, understand what's going on with the customer journey. But that also, it brings in or allows you to integrate any of the existing AI tools or engines that are out there that you might be using. You can actually put those inside Console and create a better overall automation experience, both for your teams internally and for your customers. So I'm going to end there and hand over to everybody else. So just 3 things. Sorry, a bit hasty, Stu. Hang on a sec. No, he wasn't really, just stretching off, limbering up. Just looking ahead, I think before next, hopefully, see you all again next year, I think we've got these 3 big challenges. We've got this improved customer sat, but this ever hungry engine of customer expectation where they want more. And as I said, I think data is key to that. We also must remember our teams, and we have a huge amount of work to do. And I think in order to guarantee success in improving customer experience over the next 12 months, I would genuinely advocate that you put as much effort into the internal component and your people and your teams as you do into the external component. Because the difference now, the thing that we can do that was always a problem 5 or 10 years ago, is technology has become the enabler rather than the blocker. That's it. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand back to Stuart. Have a great day, and I look forward to chatting with all of you during the course of the day. Thanks.